Thank you, Mr. President. It's with pride and humility that I stand and thank my colleagues for passing Senate Bill 381 by unanimous consent last night. Passed by the House, once passed by the House and signed by the President, this bill will award Congressional gold medals to the surviving World War II heroes we know as the Doolittle Tokyo Raiders. The effort to pass this bill has been a personal one for me. I thank 78 of my colleagues who have co-sponsored the resolution. It proves the Senate can reach consensus recognizing the service of men and women who have worn our nation's uniform. I want to thank Secretary Boozman, who was my original Republican counterpart in introducing this bill in February. Also original co-sponsor Senators Murray and Baucus and Tester and Nelson and Cantwell and Schatz, original co-sponsors. I wish that Senator Lautenberg, also an original co-sponsor and a close personal friend, the last World War II veteran in the Senate, I wish that he were here today to see its passage. A special thanks to Senator Cornyn for his work on this, and especially Senator Ayotte. They have my personal thanks for helping to bring so many Republicans to sponsor this bill with us. Many of you know the story of the Doolittle raid. 71 years ago, following the attack of Pearl Harbor, just 4 months earlier, 80 brave American airmen launched a mission that would become our nation's first offensive action against Japanese soil in the Second World War. They volunteered for what was called an extremely hazardous mission without knowing at the time what it actually entailed. Under the leadership of Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle, the raid involved launching 16 U.S. Army Air Corps B-25 Mitchell bombers from the deck of the USS Hornet, a feat that had never been attempted in combat before. On April 18, 1942, again, just a few months after Pearl Harbor, 650 miles from its intended target, the Hornet encountered Japanese ships. Fearing the mission might be compromised, the raiders decided to launch 170 miles earlier than anticipated. These men accepted the risk that they might not have enough fuel to make it safely beyond Japanese-occupied China. The consequences meant the raiders would almost certainly have to crash land or bail out, either above Japanese-occupied China or over the home islands of Japan. Any survivors would certainly be subjected to imprisonment or torture or death. After reaching their targets, 15 of the bombers continued to China. The 16th, dangerously low on fuel, headed to Russia. The total distance traveled by the raiders averaged 2,250 nautical miles over a period of 13 hours, making it the longest combat mission ever flown in a B-25 during the war. Of the 80 raiders who launched that day, 8 were captured. Of those 8 prisoners, 3 were executed, 1 died of disease, 4 survived as prisoners of war and returned home after the war. The Doolittle raid was a turning point for the Pacific Theater and set the stage for the Allied victory. Of the original 80 raiders, 4 survive today. A raider from Cincinnati, in my home state, Major Tom Griffin, passed away on February 26th of this year, the very night I introduced S-381. Major Griffin was the navigator for plane number 9, the Whirling Dervish, on the Doolittle raid. He survived the mission. He'd continue to fly until he was shot down in 1943 and held as a German POW for 2 years. When the war ended, Major Griffin returned home to Cincinnati, later owned his own accounting business. Like our veterans past and present, he asked for nothing. These veterans served simply because their nation asked. For many years, the surviving raiders gathered to celebrate the mission and to honor their departed fellow raiders. This year's celebration was bittersweet. It was their final reunion, they decided. All of the remaining raiders are in their 90s. It's becoming hard for them to make the annual trip. So it was decided this would be their final reunion. This is an article, Mr. President, a story in the Plain Dealer in Cleveland of the final reunion, which took place in Dayton, Ohio. The 3 remaining survivors who could make their trip, 4 are still living, only 3 could make it, called out here as an historian read the roll call. They then raised a goblet inscribed with their names. They toasted their fellow raiders with a bottle of 1896 cognac, a bottle that Commander Jimmy Doolittle passed down for the Raiders' final toast. 76 other goblets were turned upside down, one for each of the comrades who had passed away. Hundreds of people watched the solemn ceremony and offered their respects. Speaker Boehner, whose district is nearby, Dayton, Ohio, sent a letter in honor of the occasion. An Associated Press article on the ceremony, a 12-year-old boy whose grandparents brought him to the event, said, quote, "I felt like I owe them a few short hours of the thousands of hours I will be on this earth." This journey started 2 years ago for me when Brian Anderson, the Sergeant-at-Arms for the Doolittle Tokyo Raider Association, approached my office seeking a proclamation for the 70th anniversary of the raid. We achieved that goal, passing Senate Resolution 418 in August 2012 by unanimous consent, but that wasn't enough for Brian. It wasn't enough to honor these men and what they had accomplished. We set our goal for awarding the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest civilian award bestowed by Congress, limited to 2 a year in this body, to the Raiders. This honor is designated to those who, quote, "have performed an achievement that has an impact on American history and culture that is likely to be recognized as a major achievement in the recipient's field long after the achievement." These 80 veterans meet that description. They exemplify our highest ideals of courage and service. They deserve to be recognized. President Kennedy said, "A nation reveals itself not only by the men it produces, but also by the men it honors and the men it remembers." We, our nation, honor those who serve. I call on the House and I call on the Speaker to quickly act on this legislation. Sitting in the chamber today is a senator, the senator from Texas, the senior senator from Texas, who played a major role with Senator Ayotte and others in gathering co-sponsors for this Congressional Medal of Honor. I thank Senator Cornyn for his work on this. And, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I want to turn the compliment around and extend my appreciation to Senator from Ohio, Senator Brown, for his leadership on this issue. This is long overdue to these great American patriots, the recognition that they so justly earned. And